Fantastic. That's the gift that keeps on giving, right? Never gets old. Still gets it. My goodness. All right, so a couple of fun facts about film, stuff you guys may know, some of you guys are probably well versed on Spielberg and his history. 1980s, unique time in film, a lot of genres, a lot of fun movies, time travel films, rom-coms, and a lot of coming-of-age films that really spoke to a lot of us, especially the Gen Xers of the 1980s, and of course your teen films. But the films of 1982, this film comes out in 1982, and it's such an extraordinary year of 1982. Of course, you have your kind of our critical acclaimed movies, Diner, films that were popular for 8 hours, Gandhi, Tootsie, Officers and Gentlemen, Rocky III, Eye of the Tiger, and First Blood. But I think what's unique was the rise of fantasy films and sci-fi films. And this was an extraordinary year, especially for fantasy, going in, sort of the Sorcerer, Beastmaster, The Dark Crystal, remember that movie? And then of course, science fiction, The Thing came out that year. Star Trek II, which is still considered the best, one of the great sequels ever. Tron came out that year. And of course, Blade Runner. And that leaves us with E.T. and another, I think, significant film, also produced, maybe directed by Spielberg, Poltergeist, also came out in 1982. And some of this is, why was it so popular, why 1982? I think 82, 1984, and 1985, in my opinion, were just unique years of film. But some of the theory why 82 had so many classic movies, some of these films were already responding to the popularity of Jaws, maybe to some way to Star Wars in 1977. And because special effects were going through a lot of changes, it took 5 years to get these projects together, and by the time you got to 1982, you had this kind of, if you will, saturation of these films coming in, and all of them very iconic in nature. Also, this is the era of the blockbuster. The resurgence of science fiction in general and the birth of CGI. Computer animation becomes very innovative. Of course, 2001, later Star Wars both changed the look of special effects. And of course, CGI in general, Industrial Lights and Magic and Pixar were all born around this time. And a lot of the films in the 80s are definitely born out of these industries. So the blockbuster. The birth of the blockbuster really happens with Jaws, 1975, 50th anniversary of the Spielberg movie, and of course George Lucas and his Star Wars opus. So profits are going crazy around this time, and I think the rise of sequels and profitability, and just the numbers were just extraordinary in the 1980s for these films. So E.T. becomes the biggest grossing movie, of course Jurassic Park, Spielberg, his other film, broke the record. And it was eventually Titanic takes over it. And the film was in circulation for almost an entire year. Also, this is the era of synergism. This is where all your product placement, all your toys, everything, Happy Meals, all that stuff is happening. And before Reese's Pieces, there never was before, you thought about using M&M. Ever heard about that? So Reese's Pieces wasn't originally the idea for the film. It was actually they wanted to use M&M's. You know why M&M said no? Anyone know why? Because they thought he was too ugly. That's messed up. Reese's Pieces made a 300% return. And to this day, they're still doing after 40 years. M&M ain't gone away, dang. So they had a chance. Other things, there was a storybook album with Michael Jackson. It became very popular. They won a Grammy. It was one of the biggest selling albums of its time. And then this failure happened. You remember this? Man, what was that game about? Anyone know? I played that for hours. I wasted my life playing this game. And it turned out in an article in 2006, it was an accident. They were trying to rush it to the holiday season. It had no premise. And really the premise was phone home to get him home. But it was really a waste of time. And it's hailed as the worst, sorry E.T., it was the worst video game ever made. And then this thing, anyone know about the Neil Diamond song, Heart Light? I had no idea. That song is based off E.T., was inspired by E.T. And then when they found out there It's a Heartlight Disney song. And then, of course, Disney becomes like the face of marketing of everything. So E.T., Universal Friendship, a masterpiece. Wouldn't you agree? I think it's just an extraordinary movie on many levels. Of course, it's kinship to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But again, a different type of movie because in Close Encounters, the father abandons the family. We don't have that story here because the father already abandoned the family. So, and then of course, Poltergeist, another story about the suburbs. And this is something that Spielberg, there's a great book called Spielberg's America that deals about science fiction and the supernatural in suburban America. And also deals with the story that it's always close to Spielberg. Spielberg is a child of divorce. And I could relate to that, and many of us could relate. We know someone or been a part of broken families, and he was one of the first to talk about that. Also, I think it's worth mentioning the film has these kinships to the Yearling and the story about a young boy and an animal and Old Yeller. There's some similarities to those older stories. And it was nominated for 9 Academy Awards and won for sound effects, visual effects, and of course, best score, which was one of the greatest scores ever made, if not the greatest musical score for a film. But I think it's still short. I think I need to give a shout out here. I thought, if you get this going, I think no acting nominations were not, and I always feel that Dee Wallace is wonderful in this movie. I think she's extraordinary. This woman, a broken woman, kind of a genuine performance, symbolic of the single mother. This is something that's new in 1980s culture, especially in the era of the baby boomers and Gen X. I think her performance is wonderful here. Even though she came from horror movies originally, but I think her performance is just very genuine. I love Peter Coyote in this movie. He's not there a lot, but I think his speech about E.T. being a miracle and kind of relating to Elliot, I always thought it's such a wonderful performance. In an interview, Peter Coyote once said he was suffering through depression, almost flirting with suicidal tendencies. And when he made this movie, this film helped him heal him. And a lot of it had to do with the people that were involved in making the character E.T. One of the individuals was born no legs, and they used him for that unique kind of walk he had, special. Also, I don't know if it's the right word, but he had, forgive me if I'm not PC here, but little people also used for wearing the suit of E.T. And he developed a relationship with these actors, and he just felt more humbled and realized he had a greater appreciation of the world. In many ways, the movie E.T. helped him heal him from his depression. And then Henry Thomas, I don't think this film he's so wonderful in this movie. Because he carries this movie. He's the icon, of course, of the film, but even with all the special effects, I don't know anyone else who could genuinely play this part. At the time, he was going to be a rising star, but again, I think he's overlooked and underrated in this movie. He didn't make other films. He was in Legends of the Fall. He got a Golden Globe nomination in 1997 for an HBO film, but he never really became the superstar that we thought he was going to be. But he still has E.T. on his resume. And if you had a chance in your life, we could live a life like Henry Thomas, I would. Yeah, it'd be one of the greatest films ever, yes. I think child agency is so important in this film for Spielberg. He really let the kids really flow. The film is shot in chronological order, which most films usually are not. Some are, but in this case, for a big budget movie, it's rare to have a chronological design film. But Spielberg really wanted to have the progression of these actors and really feel the genuine emotions come in. You know that laugh when he says penis breath and the mom reacts to that? That's a genuine laugh. She wasn't expecting that line to happen. So, also, I don't know if people know this, but I think Drew was actually connected to both Poltergeist and E.T. And they weren't sure who was going to play who, and eventually Heather O'Rourke, which those who follow the tragedy of her, she died very young. But Drew Barrymore was actually connected to that film. Also worth noting, there's always been a debate that who directed Poltergeist. So some say that Spielberg actually directed the film, but because of contractual reasons, he couldn't direct two movies at the same time. So he had the great horror film director, Tobe Hooper, to direct the movie. But it's always been debated that Spielberg directed both E.T. and Poltergeist at the same time. Disney, believe it or not, this is not a Disney movie. It pretty much is a Disney movie. The way it feels, the way it is. It goes back like a homage to the old family films. Spielberg wanted to bring back that Disney audience. Hollywood thought the Disney audience was dead. It was failures during the 1970s, and even in the early 80s, I mean, everyone remembers some of these films back in the day, in the 80s, and some of these films. And even though, I'll be honest, in most of them, I actually like these movies, but they were not financially successful films, or they were mildly, very mildly financially successful. So Disney was going through a crisis about how to develop their movies, and E.T. confirmed that you could be the greatest film of all time and still be a family movie. And from there, Michael Eisner kind of woke up from this and decided to really rethink about how they make films, and thus becomes the Disney Renaissance that really starts with The Little Mermaid and this dominance in the 1990s, and really to lasting into the 21st century. So, the Star Wars connections. I don't know if anyone knows about this. So you see some of the toys there, that's referred, of course, to the Yoda character. But there was a wager back in 1977, two big films happened, right? Star Wars and Close Encounters. And both Spielberg and Lucas were talking to each other, like, all right, one of us are not going to make it. So either Star Wars is going to fail or Close Encounters. Actually, both were successful, but as a wager, they both gave each other 2.5% profits of each other's films. As a result, I mean, Close Encounters was very successful, but Spielberg made out like a madman. This is only for A New Hope. It's not for the franchise of Star Wars, but The New Hope of Star Wars, 1977. Spielberg gained some of those profits, and really that helped him making E.T., because E.T. became a personal film. He didn't want to really make a film that is generic in nature. He wanted to make something that was genuine to him. So the movie is very unconventional. And a lot of people, I mean, Hollywood was really, at that moment, he had already had these great big films with Jaws and Close Encounters and Raiders of the Lost Ark before. So there was some artistic freedom, even if E.T. was not to succeed. It wasn't going to be a great loss. And of course, it was a blockbuster hit. So Melissa Matheson, screenplay writer, she was married to Harrison Ford at the time. And while Raiders of the Lost Ark was being filmed, she was there with Harrison, and Spielberg and her talked a lot about this movie. Now Spielberg had been thinking about this movie post Close Encounters, and he was trying to think of doing another version, but this time changing the story, reciprocating the story, and having this child version of it. And then there's a deleted scene. Anyone know about that? Harrison Ford is actually in E.T. You can technically hear him. I think some say that's his voice as the teacher. I don't know. Some even debate that teacher is actually Harrison Ford. So there's been a lot of theories about that. Be that as it may, there was a deleted scene. And I remember as a kid, they used to give out these cards for films, like baseball cards for films. And I remember seeing one with Elliot floating on a chair, and I remember that. That's because of this deleted scene. You can find it on YouTube, and by and large, it's an awful scene. It is a boring movie. Just check it out, trust me. It's not that good. It's a really weird scene. So lost families, broken families, divorce. This is a story that Spielberg reinforces later on in his career, and his extraordinary film about his life, The Fabelmans, also examines, and there's parallels to E.T. with this film. So personal healing for Spielberg. Spielberg really had resentment of the divorce. He kind of blamed his father. Turned out his mom actually played his dad dirty, if you know the story about that. But of course, this film was a means of closure for himself. So Close Encounters, in many ways, is about a father abandoning his family in the end of the film. But this is a film about child perspective. So as you notice, you have the low angles. Most of the film is shot in low angles to give that perspective of a child. About 75% of the film is shot in low angles. And then the faceless adults. So when do you start seeing full faces in the movie? When does it happen? Anyone? So you have Peter Coyote, or he has like Jaws-like outfit, right? He's like a shark. But you still don't see his face clearly. He's still behind a glass. But when do you start seeing everyone's face? E.T. dies. When E.T. dies, all of a sudden. Why is that? Anyone know? Why would Spielberg do that? Why do we start seeing adults' faces after E.T. dies? I don't really have an answer. I'm sorry? E.T. wasn't scary? Anyone else? Anyone have any theories? I think it's interesting. So but of course, you see the mother, right? And that's really the mother, the parent, that's security. But I find it interesting that the perspective of the film changes once E.T. dies, thus the film becomes different. And maybe because Elliot's no longer a child. He's born, he becomes more of an adult. The transition. So some people also look at this as a spiritual fable. I mean, here's a character that has healing powers. There's a death, there's a resurrection, believing, there's miracles. So there's some say it has some biblical innuendos. Even if you look at the image, which is also by design by the artist, he gave the Sistine Chapel, Adam and God aesthetic to the E.T., which that hand is really not, Elliot is actually, that's the artist, that's his daughter's hand, I thought that was funny. So there was a private White House screening with President Reagan. Reagan arrived and watched the movie, and then Spielberg actually wrote a letter to Reagan thanking him for having the private screening. And then at the Cannes Film Festival, I've been to Cannes, and no disrespect, but the French critics are rough. They're really rough. But they loved this movie. They thought it was great, and really set the stage of not only being an American popular film, but an international hit. And then the musical score, John Williams has won 5 Oscars, 3 with Spielberg films, Jaws, Close Encounters. He won with Star Wars. He won with Schindler's List. And I guess from the beginning to the very end, the last 5 minutes of the movie, that wonderful musical score that's being played, what happens is Spielberg decides to shut the movie off because there was problems with the timing of the movie, and he really basically told John Williams basically, look, just go with your emotion, and I'll re-edit the film to really match the emotions of the film, and that's really why the magic really happens, that final shot. This film is technically a Halloween movie. I think I find that funny as well. And then there was some controversial version. It's the 2002 re-edit where they got rid of the radios, they got rid of the guns, they put radios, and then Spielberg felt like, all right, that was stupid. Let's bring the guns right back. And a lot of it had to do with, when you look at films in the past, like, do you think like Michelangelo would redo his work, or Van Gogh, or anyone like artists? We should accept what they are, what they were at the period when they were created, and it doesn't make sense to re-edit something. And Lucas, for whatever reason, and Spielberg got on this kick where they were just re-editing their films. And at the end of the day, I mean, you know, Han Solo shot first. You know what I'm saying? So a year-long theatrical release. 360 million domestically, 435 worldwide, and it's a story about lost children. Also worth noting, behind E.T., I think I already mentioned this about the artists that were involved and the special people that were involved in making it. But the Spielberg face, this is kind of the staple of Spielberg, the close-up, the meditative look of its characters, and his love for children in his movies that really become kind of this ongoing theme that even carries over in nostalgic stories of the 1980s. There's a lot of films even beyond Spielberg that in the 80s that dealt with children, even going to the Goonies, and even when you look at Stranger Things, all these are reflections of Spielberg's work. And then by the time you get to, once he gets older, the era of maturation happens with Schindler's List, but even in Schindler's List, what motivates the protagonist is a child that ends up dying. So final thoughts. I mean, I want to ask more questions. I don't know if you know this, but E.T., Elliot's also E.T., Elliot Taylor. Anyone know that? So it's E.T. and E.T., and it's that reciprocation, right? They're always doing, there's like this level of mimesis. They're mimetic to one another, and even by name. Aliens and alienation, these are some of the binary themes I feel. Love and friendship, of course. Childhood and adulthood. Abandonment and closure. And this is an important film for Spielberg because he needed closure. And, you know, I'll be right here, that's such a powerful scene. And I remember, even when anyone watches this movie 82, your parents cried. Trust me, I witnessed all that. So, and I'm very happy that when E.T. came alive, you guys cheered. And when E.T. had the boys flying, everyone cheered. That also happened in 1982. So, any questions, anyone? Anything? Who's first timer? Anyone? What? Yay or nay? Yay. All right. No questions at all? Yes.
Did they ever think about doing a sequel?
Yes, there was a sequel in the works, and Spielberg realized, why ruin a good thing? It doesn't make sense yet. Now, in Phantom Menace, there's a little E.T. appearance in Phantom Menace, but, you know, that's Lucas, so. Anyone else? All right, guys. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, I can feel that. There's definitely that going. Some of the sound effects too, the voice of E.T., some of it is actually Spielberg, and the way he hums, that's an actually cat purring. They use some cat special effects for E.T., so. Anyone else? We're all good. Up or where? Go ahead, yell it out. A Christmas commercial? Was there an ET Christmas commercial? What was going on? So what's going on? Tell me. Right. That's fair. I know what you're talking about. Henry Thomas makes a return right for the 40th, promoting the film. And I saw this film, and it's funny, I saw this film on IMAX in an empty theater. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter if it's full or is empty. I so cheered, I so cried at full watching it. In a hollow theater. It was amazing. But I'm sure there's a lot of things. I think the film is somewhat maybe ahead of its time. This technology at Texas Instruments. That was a big deal at the time. The dependency of technology and communication. I mean, using something that is somewhat physical and invisible and communicating to a far universe. That's something that's also ubiquitous with cell phones. So maybe there is some kind of connection in the past and present. Thank you. Good.
That was awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, by the way, Elliot, this is for you. Yeah, thank you.